Dubliners wasn't all that long in the making. In fact, he began to write it in 1904. The first story was The Sisters. There are 15 stories in all. The first 14 were written within just 2 years. And the final one in 1906 was, of course, The Dead. So there was a concentrated time of intense creative exploration of the short story form. When he was just beginning, when he was just 22 years of age. However, it was a very long time in the publishing. The problem was that Dubliners was a work of realism. It was set in a very real Dublin, and his publishers were very, very anxious about libel. The naming of streets, the naming of houses, the naming of people, the naming of shops meant that they were terrified. Indeed, his publisher Roberts, or who was to be the publisher in 1913, burnt the manuscript to Joyce's anger. He described this collection of stories as being the creative child that I had carried around with me for 10 years. So, of course, its publishing finally in 1914 was a great cause for celebration for him. Joyce wanted to say just about everything about Dublin. Again, it's a work of realism, and Joyce said in writing this, what he wanted to do was to provide for the people of Dublin a nicely polished looking glass in which they could see themselves. And what he wanted them to see was a city which he believed was suffering from an intense paralysis, that the great social and religious forces about it meant that there was no way forward, and the people themselves were subjected to an extremely unhappy lives. He wanted to show just how awful a place Dublin was, and I think at the same time suggest what a wonderful place that it could be, that there was an indomitable spirit there which was being crushed by forces which the people really needed to emerge from. It was written then as a work, a great moral work. He set out really to improve the people. He didn't have much public standing as a writer in 1914. He wasn't known, of course. He had had almost nothing published. This was to be the first work published. He was being recognized in 1914 as somebody with fabulous potential. So great writers and great intellects in Europe like Ezra Pound were certainly on his side. But there was no audience. Indeed, there was little or no audience for Dubliners. And when the book was published, to his great disappointment, of course, it sold rather little.